Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'll start now. I'd just like to say after today, I like my jokes like I like my robots, efficient and killer. So what a great day we've had today. Tremendous attendance all day. And now after many delicious appetizers, we come to the main course. With experience as a senior advisor to 2 US presidents, 8 years of service as a highly regarded governor of the great state of Indiana, and now as a leading national voice on higher education, it's easy to spot President Daniels promoting Purdue in a newspaper or on national television shows. On campus, it's even easier to find him working out next to you in the co-rec, sharing a meal in the dining halls, or cheering beside you in Mackey. In addition to being approachable, Mitch has a relentless and insatiable appetite for new and exciting ideas. So it's fair to say this whole event is his fault. It's now my great pleasure to introduce the 12th president of Purdue University, Mitch Daniels.
Jerry, thanks. Thanks to the organizers. Thanks most of all to each of you for taking part in what I hope and am told has been an illuminating and stimulating day. The best is yet to come in about 2 minutes. I can claim, I guess it's fair to say, some degree of patrimony for this event. And I'll just tell you how that happened. A friend of mine who's a well-regarded national columnist wrote one. It was in essence a book review of a book whose cover you're looking at there. I put it on my Christmas list. It sounded interesting. It ruined my Christmas vacation because I came back petrified. I gave the book to McCartney there and said, Jerry, you're the expert. Please read this book when you got a minute. Come back and tell me this guy Barrat's nuts. Jerry comes back in a week and says, he's not nuts. I said, this is a subject we should be discussing then. And here we are. History has taught the attentive to be relentlessly optimistic about technology. Over and over and over again, humans have worried that the latest invention, the latest breakthrough, the latest set of new technologies was going to ruin life as they knew it. It was going to displace people who would never find productive work again, that sort of thing. And they've been wrong, and wrong. We have fed billions more than anybody ever imagined, and we have created higher standards of living each time by virtue of human ingenuity. And so my predisposition on encountering any argument like the one made in James Barratt's book is to believe we're just going to replay that movie yet again. But Mr. Barrat and others who are looking at this subject are really raising a question that maybe history does not give us the right predictive tools for, because they are talking about an invention or series of them which promises to create an ingenuity greater than our own, in fact, vastly and maybe incomprehensibly greater than our own. So it seemed like a premier institution giving birth to many of these technologies, pursuing them and studying them, but also studying the implications, we hope, in society, in its economy, in the social interactions between people, was a place that ought to be engaged in a subject that appeared to be this important. It just occurred to me backstage, one of the great theologians once said, if the promises of Christianity are false, then nothing matters. If they are true, then nothing else matters. If the contentions in this book happen to be true, then one could, without stretching things very far, suggest maybe nothing else matters. Some words are so overused and cheapened, I think it's sometimes unfortunate. A recent example might be heroes. My current example would be existential. A very popular word these days, but if it applies to any topic that I can think of, or any situation, it's the one we're gathered on today. And to talk to us about it is the author of a book I hope many of you have read and all of you ultimately will. He's a celebrated and award-winning documentary journalist. His works you have seen on PBS, on National Geographic Channel, on the History Channel over the course of 20 years. He has eclectic interests and has done some magnificent pieces which I've seen. But the point I would make is this. Here at Purdue, we believe in following the facts. And also we believe in encouraging, even welcoming the refutation of our own ideas, our own experiments if they can't be replicated. Not all journalists operate that way. Many start with a preconceived idea and then just select the facts that fit it. Not our guest. I confirmed talking to him what I remembered from reading about him. He started with a very different outlook toward the technologies which he eventually covered here. And it was only his encounters with the facts as he came to understand them that led him to write this stunning book and to become, I think, an important voice for us all. Once again, if he's right or close to right, until we solve these problems, not much else matters. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome James Barrat. Thank you for coming. Thank you very much.
Wow, what a great crowd. Welcome to Dawn or Doom Summit. As you probably guessed, I'm Doom. I want to thank especially President Mitchell and Vice President Jerry McCartney for inviting me here. What they don't know is that after they had their conversation where the President got a little bit scared after reading my book, and then several sleepless nights later, Jerry called him back and said, yeah, I kind of agree with what he's writing about. I got an email from the President of Texas A&M, and he said, I'm kind of scared. And so being an amateur statistician, I concluded that my core readership are the presidents of large influential universities. So I wanted to start this by saying if there are any presidents of large influential universities in the audience who are traveling incognito, then let's talk after the conference. I was pleased to learn that not only does Purdue's College of Technology have 30,000 alumni, but it graduates more women with technology degrees than any other university or college in the country, and that's an astounding accomplishment. Women only hold 18% of technology jobs, so there's a real imbalance there, and Purdue is really working to correct that. The other part of that is that most of our jobs in the future will be technology jobs. As we'll get to, and as some of the fine speakers spoke about today, our jobs are going away to automation, to AI. I'd say the good news is the jobs are coming home. The bad news is the robots are going to get them. So it's an interesting time to talk about AI risk, and it's very prescient of Purdue to establish this. I used to say to students, you could take all the people that are involved in AI risk and put them in a phone booth and still have enough room to make an international call. And they'd look at me and say, well, what's a phone booth? But recently, Stephen Hawking, the physicist Stephen Hawking, and the physicist Max Tegmark and Stuart Russell all came out and wrote an article in the Huffington Post. And they said something that really stuck with me. And this was like 3 months ago. They said in the short term, the question will be, who controls the AI? In the long term, the question will be, can we control AI? And that's essentially what my book's about. Stephen Hawking put another kind of spin on it by saying, imagine something, if you can, thousands of times more intelligent than we are, and what kinds of weapons they could develop, weapons that we don't even understand. So he put kind of a little nightmare scenario on top of my nightmare scenario, because I hadn't really thought of that wrinkle. Then, just a few weeks ago, Elon Musk, creator of SpaceX, the company that's sending rockets into space right now for NASA, and also the Tesla automobile, came out and said he invests in AI companies not because he wants to get richer, but because he wants to keep his eye on superintelligence. And and superintelligence, he says, is as unpredictable and as volatile as nuclear fission. So this phone booth is getting a little more crowded, and it's time for us to have this conversation as a society. As President Daniels said, I've written this book, but my normal job is to make documentary films, some of which you might have seen on PBS or the Discovery Channel or National Geographic. I want to make a quick pitch for one. I've got a film on PBS on October 1st. It's not about AI. It's called The Rise of the Black Pharaohs. It's about the Kush dynasty, which around 700 BC overthrew Egypt, and for 100 years were pharaohs themselves. And they were from Sudan, and we spent a month in Sudan in March shooting this film. There was a pernicious and durable lie in archaeology until about 30 years ago that black Africans had never made monumental architecture. As it turns out, there are more pyramids in Sudan than there are in Egypt. And the mistake people were making was they were attributing the monuments of Sudan to Egyptians. So our film explores this myth and tries to blow it up. So that's October 1st on PBS, Rise of the Black Pharaohs. It was through a documentary that I became interested in AI, and that's what I'm here to talk with you about this evening. Artificial intelligence, what's wrong with how we're developing it, and what we can do. And I hope to give you some things to think about, because I think this is the most important conversation we could be having. So let's jump right in with, quickly, what is artificial intelligence? It's the theory and development of computer systems able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence. So right away, the definition throws it all back to humans, because by and large, what we know of intelligence is human intelligence. But this is what I like to think of for people who are as a gateway thought to AI. AI is not just the realm of nerds. It's not just this alien, strange thing. What it is, and this is the gateway idea, what it is it's the most profound look at ourselves as humans of any of the sciences we've yet developed. It involves psychology, philosophy, neuroscience, perception, sight, natural language processing, ethics. It asks us who we are and how we do what we do. It asks us all about ourselves. It asks us, who are you and what is intelligence? I talked to a lot in writing this book. I talked to a lot of AI makers and heard a lot of different definitions of intelligence. And the best, most simple and elegant one I got was this: that it's the ability to achieve goals in a variety of novel environments and to learn. And a lot is packed into that definition. First, intelligence has to achieve goals. It has to do something, whether that's navigation or theorem proving or search or natural language processing or character recognition or any of those things. If it's not achieving a goal, it's probably not very high quality intelligence. This definition suggests that intelligence has to have a body, or it at least has to be mobile or movable, so you can move it into different environments and it can adapt to them. That's a big point of contention among different AI makers, whether or not intelligence needs to be embodied or not. You have your hand up?
Yes. Who decides the goal?
I'm sorry, what?
Who decides the goal?
Who decides the goal? The programmer decides the goal. And I think what we're going to do is take questions afterwards. Although if anyone's got a really pressing question, I'd be glad to answer it. But I think we're going to roll through this, if you can, and I'll take questions later. So it's got to achieve goals, and then it probably needs a body. It may or may not need a body. The jury's still out on that. But if you think of IBM's Watson, which is the most advanced cognitive architecture we have right now, and think of all the things it can do, well, or the things it's going to be able to do soon. Imagine that in a robotic body, and you get the sense of how much more powerful that intelligence is if you can move from place to place. And most importantly, intelligence has to learn. all the animals on the planet are born with all the abilities they'll ever have, for the most part, except us. So human-level intelligence, we can learn languages, we can learn skills, we can learn new crafts, we can invent religions, which we do. We can meditate and change our respiration, change our brainwaves. We've got a terrific capacity for learning and passing on information. So that's what we'll require of high-level intelligence. I've been interested in AI for decades, and I was as President Daniels said, I was very optimistic about it. And then one year, about 12 years ago, I got to make a film about artificial intelligence, and I interviewed Ray Kurzweil, who was kind of my hero at the time. Ray Kurzweil has been called the Thomas Edison of our time. He invented the machine that reads books to the blind. He was a pioneer in optical character recognition. He's working for Google now. He's trying to put strong AI into search, and in a recent interview he said he wants to create a machine that makes 100 trillion calculations per second and can be shared with 1 billion people. So it makes 100 trillion calculations per second, which is what he estimates our brains do, our massively parallel human brains. 100 trillion calculations a second, and then share it with 1 billion people. So you can see what he's up to. He wants to create human intelligence in a machine and put it online as a service, or as super enhanced search. And that's a really ambitious thing, but I call his project the Manhattan Project of AI because I think it's on the fast track compared to a lot of the competition. I also interviewed Rodney Brooks, who's the premier roboticist of our time. He created a company called iRobot that makes the Roomba that vacuums your house. But he also made a bunch of military-use robots that can be fitted with weapons. In fact, when we were in Sudan, we took 2 iRobot robots with us called First Looks, and they're small robots that look like tractors. We put them in pyramids, and they set up a little network among themselves and beam back images to us. So this shows my inner geek, because the first thing I thought of when I thought of pyramids was, let's get some robots in there. We also had two aerial drones, 2 little helicopters that have just changed my business, because now we can take one of these $5,000 devices with us and do aerials wherever we set up, instead of renting a helicopter one day for 3 hours and get some bumpy shots. Now we can do it all the time. So robots are already changing our lives. Brooks was also very optimistic about the time to come when we'll share the planet with smarter than human machines. Behind him is a robot called Baxter that you might have heard about during the talks today. The most interesting thing about Baxter is made by a new company Brooks started called Rethink Robotics. And it has a variety of manipulators, so we can do most things we can do with our hands, or many of the things we can do. Not the very fine precision work, but the big factory stuff. But the interesting thing when I was reading about Baxter to me was, Baxter costs just $16,000. That's $1,000 less than a person making minimum wage makes in a year. So you can see where that's going. You get a Baxter and use him for 10 years, or you hire someone at minimum wage. So, and Baxter is extremely capable, and he's going to be a mass-produced robot, and he'll be on the scene. And as I said earlier, I can't remember when today, I've had a lot of conversations, but the good news is the jobs are coming home. The bad news is Baxter will get them. And both Kurzweil and Brooks were very optimistic about the time coming when we'll share the planet with smarter than human machines. Kurzweil's optimism goes into which I used to share, although not the whole immortality part. He believes that a confluence of technologies, nano, info, bio, and cogno, will solve all of mankind's problems, including famine and disease, and ultimately mortality. He has a book called Live Long Enough to Live Forever. So both of these men were very, very optimistic about this day coming when we'll share the planet with machines that are first as smart and then smarter than us. But then I interviewed Arthur C. Clarke, the late Arthur C. Clarke. Before Clarke was a science fiction writer and won all the science fiction awards there are, he was a mathematician and physicist. He created a little book of equations about lifting a mass of weight out of orbit and putting it into orbit. When Werner von Braun, the German rocketeer, got out of Germany, the first person he wanted to meet was Arthur C. Clarke because of this book of equations. This book of equations endeared him to NASA, so that when Stanley Kubrick was trying to make 2001 A Space Odyssey, he had access to all of NASA's prototype models of the space station. But Arthur C. Clarke said to me, I was telling him about my enthusiasm for artificial intelligence and about this kind of, this rapture I felt, and he said, well, it's not going to be like that. Machine intelligence is going to win out. It'll overtake us. And that really wasn't what I wanted to hear. And it planted a seed in my head that took me a long time to unravel. I started to, he put it more like this than the way I just said it. He said, we humans steer the future not because we're the fastest creature or the strongest creature, but because we're the smartest creature on the planet. And when we share the planet with a creature smarter than we are, they'll steer the future. So this idea, as I said, kind of turned the tables on me. I'd heretofore been optimistic. This planted the seed of doubt in my mind. And I began interviewing AI makers to see what they thought. And they all agreed on one idea that came up early in my conversations. They all agreed that within 100 years, all the decisions affecting our lives will be made by machines. 100% of them agreed with that statement. And so I started asking follow-up questions. Will it be a handover or a takeover? Will we grow with machines, with augmentation and implants, as transhumanists say, as Ray Kurzweil says? Or will their intelligence grow very rapidly and we'll be taken over by them and swept away? So the question to me was then, how do we get from the smartphones in our pockets and the computers we have today to machines so smart and so unpredictable that they threaten our existence? How do we make that jump? Let's start here with a show of hands. First of all, who believes that we can create machines as smart as humans? A bunch of technologists. Who believes that? So if you don't believe that, then you believe that the brain is a problem that's too hard for engineering to solve, or you believe that there's something mystical or magical or immutable about the human brain that will never penetrate. Who thinks intelligence is too big a problem to solve? Those of you who didn't raise your hands before. Who thinks there's something mystical or magical about the brain that we'll never compete with? Good. Well, predictably, less than 10% of the AI makers I spoke with thought that the problem was too hard. They want to keep their jobs. Very few of them thought there was something mystical or magical, and those were the people. They have a whole interesting take on it, and it's about consciousness, and where does consciousness come from, and is consciousness necessary for intelligence? And this is a profound question for us. It's an interesting question for ethicists and theologians. Will we make machines with consciousness, with a conscience? Will we make machines with true self-awareness? Or will self-awareness simply consist of a model that the machine has of its own body, its own abilities, and the space around it? I'm with the technologists, you guys who raised your hands first, guys and girls. I think that we'll create machines that are smarter than we are, and then shortly after that, scientists will create greater than human intelligence. So the question that I was asking was then when? Will it take 10 years? Will it take 100 years? And I started polling scientists. And the answers I got were interesting. 2045 was the mean date when smart as human intelligence would be created. There was a cluster of people who voted around 2029, which happens to be when Ray Kurzweil thinks that we'll have the kind of ultimate invention, human-level intelligence at the price of a computer. And that's something I want you to remember, because I'm going to refer to it later, human-level intelligence at the price of a computer. Some people thought it wouldn't be until 2100, and some people thought, of course, never. But then, recently, Gary Marcus, who teaches at New York University, and he's a neuroscientist, reviewed my book, Our Final Invention, for The New Yorker. And he said this about how long it will take. A century from now, nobody will care how long it took. A century from now, they won't care if it took 10 years or 100 years to create human-level intelligence in a machine and then smarter than human intelligence. What they'll care about is what happened next. Will we have been prepared for it? So it's not really whether it's going to. It's for a lot of people, it's not an if, it's a when, and then when doesn't really matter if it's going to have a really bad impact on us. It's what we do now, or what we do in the window we've got. Will we be ready for it? Will machines get smarter incrementally again, or all at once? Even Ray Kurzweil, surprisingly, who's very optimistic, that both times I've interviewed him, he's said some version of the same thing, that ultimately we'll create machines that we'll no longer understand. Right now, on Wall Street, there are the quants, the quantitative, that's the name for the people who are writing the algorithms that make 74% of the trades on Wall Street. There's not one quant who knows the whole of one algorithm. They all build different parts. And these algorithms talk to each other across Wall Street, and they buy and sell stocks at millisecond speeds. They've had a couple of crashes, nothing terribly serious. They've started to regulate these things. But you could say about these algorithms that are making 74% of the trades, we don't really understand them in full. We don't understand them. We use a number of black box systems in creating cognitive architectures, in creating advanced artificial intelligence. One's called genetic algorithms, one's called artificial neural networks, which are roughly modeled on our brains. In both of these techniques, we know what the inputs are, we know what the data is, we know what the data is, and we see what the outputs are, and we adjust the inputs to get better outputs, but we don't know what's happening in the middle, and that's why it's called a black box system. So we're essentially saying we're going to use tools that we don't really understand, and we're wed to that idea, and that's as we'll see a little bit ahead, that may prove perilous. So, if Ray Kurzweil, and here's the phrase, the part I want you to remember about this is self-improving, self-aware, self-improving machines. How do we get from machines that might be roughly our intelligence, which as we just learned from talking to AI makers, could be 20 years, could be 100 years, doesn't really matter. How do we get from there to superintelligence? And that comes down to an axiom, a simple formula that was created about 50 years ago in the 1960s by I.J. Good. Now this is the last slide with a lot of words I'm going to give you. You have 20 seconds. So he's talking about basically a self-aware, self-improving machine, a machine that can do anything we can do intellectually, which includes making smart machines. I want to tell you something about I.J. Good before I move on, because he's a fascinating character. He worked at Bletchley Park with Alan Turing. Alan Turing was at Bletchley Park in England defeating the Enigma machine. It was an encoding machine that the Germans invented. They had one at headquarters. Every U-boat, every submarine had one. They could send encrypted messages. A handful of chess masters, basically, and Go masters, and thinkers like Turing and I.J. Good got together and defeated the Enigma machine, and it really helped shorten the war. But he was a good friend of Alan Turing's, and I.J. Good was a chess master, so he taught Turing how to play really good chess. Turing was a world-class athlete. He was a world-class runner, and he could never beat Good. So to make the playing field level, he invented a version of chess where you move and then you run all the way around his garden, all the way around his house and his garden, and then the other guy can't move until you get back. So this gave him a terrific advantage over little, kind of weak I.J. Good. It's been said also that he taught Good how to play Go, and pretty soon Good was beating him at Go as well. I like the way I.J. Good puts this, but I rewrote it in the book a slightly different way, or rephrased it in a slightly different way, and we're going to see some of this with the machines we talk about in a minute. But we've already created machines that are better than we are at chess, Jeopardy, and many other tasks like navigation, theorem proving, search, and more. At some point, probably within the next decade or two, we'll create machines that are better than us at AI research and development. So we'll create self-aware, self-improving machines. Better than us at AI research and development. We're going to see how that could happen coming up right ahead. And that would fulfill I.J. Good's prophecy. So that takes us back to the question, how will we get along with them? Why do we assume they'll be friendly? So let's talk about IBM's Watson. For a minute. Watson, if you don't know about it, in February of 2011, it beat the two grand champions at Jeopardy, which is actually a very complicated game. Does everyone like me sit in front of Jeopardy and try to win? And kind of, you get to the first commercial and you go, I did okay. I was going to do something else. It's a complicated game. It involves knowing a lot about science, about popular culture, about sports. And Watson had a lot of knowledge, but it's puns, it's turns of phrase. It's incredible what it makes us do, the gymnastics it makes us do to win. But Watson did it. And it did it by roughly emulating a human brain. Watson is the first of a new species that scientists are calling cognitive architecture, or thinking machines. And Watson did its thinking with a really interesting aggregate. And why it's different from all the other computers is it did it with a very interesting aggregate of techniques. They include knowledge representation, decision-making, statistical reasoning, hypothesis generation, evidence gathering, and scoring. So what Watson did was it got a question, it generated a hypothesis about it, it gathered evidence to support or refute those hypotheses, and then it's evaluated all of them and did some more analytics on them, scored them, and then chose one. Now that's all pretty complicated. And that's sort of what we do. That's sort of what we do. And the way, I spoke with David Ferrucci, the head of Team Watson, and he and his team basically sat around and thought about how did we think? Well, we have plan A and plan B. We base it on our feelings. We make a lot of mistakes. We have a lot of cognitive biases. We make a decision and more data won't change that decision, which is a big mistake. Once we've made our decision, we keep it. Machines don't do that. But does it matter? Does it matter if it answers questions the way we do? Well, this is something I spoke about earlier today. But there's an interesting thought puzzle that goes with this idea. That goes with the question: does Watson think? And it's, do submarines swim? Now, submarines aren't like fish. They don't swim like fish. But they swim a lot faster. They swim farther. They can go deeper. Nuclear subs can stay afloat indefinitely. They can't reproduce. They can't eat things. But they take this swimming game on, and they really play a powerful game, and they win. Do airplanes fly? Well, the Wright brothers borrowed some principles of flight from birds, but airplanes don't fly like birds, not anymore. They fly farther and they fly faster. So I'd like you to think about cognitive architectures. Does Watson think? Well, he'll never think precisely the way we do. He'll think faster. He'll think higher, deeper. Watson had 200 million pages of information to turn to, and that includes the whole of Wikipedia, plus a bunch of ontologies, collections of words and their meanings. So we'll never match that. And unlike us, Watson's capabilities, according to Moore's law, will double every 18 months. So what's Watson doing today? Watson is preparing to take the federal medical licensing exam. Watson is going to be a doctor or a physician's assistant until somebody passes a law that says it's okay for him to be a doctor. Watson is doing pharmacological research. Watson is doing what first-year legal associates do. It's doing discovery, legal discovery. Watson, the latest thing it's doing is you'll hire Watson. Watson will ingest all the data of your business since its inception in an unstructured way, and then you quiz Watson about what you should do, what practices you should how you can improve your performance. So that's a $250 an hour job if you're a human, and Watson's moving into that. So when people say to you, and when they say to me, AI has been in the dark since its inception, since 1958, at the conference at Dartmouth. They aimed high and they never got there. Well, Watson is taking, not Watson, but computers and artificial intelligence are taking our jobs along with automation. So they've got something right. They're doing something right because we're losing our jobs to them. So either we're not very good or they're doing very well, and I think that they're doing very well. Some of the jobs where humans are being replaced by AI and automation right now, here's a short list: sports writers, travel agents, bank tellers, manufacturing jobs of all kinds, postal workers, clerical workers, pharmacists. In my book, Our Final Invention, I've got 2 paragraphs about a basketball game, one written by a sports writer, one written by a computer. You really can't tell the difference. If you had to give one a slight edge, it would be the machine. There's a company called Automated Insights that publishes 100,000 sports articles that you see in papers and on the internet. And you will not know when you read them if they're written by a machine or a human. Automated Insights is getting into editorials and news reporting. There's another company called Narrative Science that does the same thing. And they also do business narrative. So they do sort of what Watson does. You give it a bunch of unstructured data and it tells you a story about your business. It tells you a story. It does an analytical story about your business that tells you where your pitfalls are and where you can improve. So those are jobs that are being taken right now. In the future, coming up, jobs that will be replaced by computers, medical diagnosticians, as we discussed, drivers of all kinds, astronauts, pilots, soldiers, software developers. A recent article in the MIT Technology Review said that 45% of all jobs will be automated within the next 20 years. And that's with a combination of automation and AI. 45% of all jobs. Where are those people going to go? What are they going to do? I think that's actually a fairly conservative estimate. Another report claims 80% of physicians' jobs will be replaced. So how close is human intelligence in a machine to being attained? Well, 2 things. One, we've already got machines that observe a pendulum swinging and derive principles of physics from it. We've got machines that write software, genetic algorithms write software. We've got machines that improve already existing software that improves software. We've got algorithms that judge software and tell you where it can be improved. So self-improving software is not very far away. Self-aware self-improving software is still 10 to 20 years away. But how close are we to reaching human-level intelligence in a machine? Right now, we're so close that a lot of companies are pouring billions of dollars into developing what's called AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. All the machines I've talked about till now have been very narrow AI. Even playing Jeopardy, despite the aggregate of abilities that go into it, even that is a narrow approach. Driving is a narrow job. But now the task is to create AGI, and companies are spending billions of dollars to do it. Why would you want virtual brains? Why would you want virtual brains at the price of a computer? That's an idea we started with. Because an artificial brain at the price of a computer will be the most lucrative technology in the history of the world. An artificial brain at the price of a computer will be the most lucrative technology. Imagine taking 20,000 PhD quality brains and training them on cancer research, on climate modeling, on weapons development, as Stephen Hawking fears. So imagine putting this technology into robots. Well, a lot of people are. So who are these people that want to be the first to create it? This is a race, and this is an incomplete list of people who are pursuing AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. There's some of the familiar faces, IBM and Google. There's the Blue Brain Project, just got €1 billion in Switzerland. They're reverse engineering a brain. There's Apple, there's Englu. There's also, not to mention, DARPA, the NSA. They've both made it very clear that DARPA funds a lot of the AI research in the country. NSA, the same people that have been listening to your phone calls and putting together your contact book and mine, they have a $50 billion black budget every year. A lot of that will be going to creating AGI. Israel wants it, China wants it, and a bunch of other companies. What do these groups have in common? Well, they know that the same way that that steam powered the 19th century and electricity powered the 20th century, artificial intelligence will power the 21st century. This is AI's century. So you might ask yourself, what could possibly go wrong? So far, machines run, they undergrid our civil infrastructure. They undergrid, they work behind banking. They work behind transportation. They work behind our water supply. They make, as we discussed, they make a lot of the trades on Wall Street. What's wrong with trusting them? Computers are everywhere, and we're dependent on them. But how do they jump to dangerous? This is a guy who is one of the handful of people in that phone booth who's really fighting this issue. What he wants to do is create a science for understanding superintelligence before we create it. And to try to make this simple, let me put it like this. As we said before, to understand what superintelligence is going to do, you have to be at least that smart yourself. But he's decided that there's an economic model for predicting the behavior of rational agents. It's called rational agent theory of economics, Homo economicus, rational agent theory. It states that rational agents have goals and preferences which are called their utility function, and they'll always work in a logical way to satisfy their utility function, and they'll never veer from it. So he uses that. Rational agent theory didn't work with humans. We're not rational. We don't do things in a predictable way. It was thrown out. But with logic-based machines, it should work as a way to create predictive models. So he argues that the rational systems that are self-aware and self-improving, there's that word again that Kurzweil used, there's that key to I.J. Good's simple theorem. Self-aware, self-improving machines will develop basic drives. They won't be benign. It won't be garbage in, garbage out. These are machines that are intelligent. They're not going to be like the chess program on your computer. They're going to have different traits. It works like some of these traits include resource acquisition, self-protection, efficiency, and creativity. It works like this. Self-improving machines will pursue the goals they're created with. Remember, we talked about intelligence having goals. Whether space exploration or playing chess. To succeed, they'll need resources, whether it's energy or money or hardware. They won't be satisfied with trying to fulfill their goals. They'll also seek to avoid failure modes like being turned off. Because being turned off would be the worst thing for a goal-seeking agent to do. It would be the worst thing to happen to it. It would be cataclysmic to its goal-seeking nature. They'll be efficient and not squander resources, and they'll use their intelligence to find creative routes to goal fulfillment. Since improving their own software will be one obvious route to goal success, they'll grow their own intelligence, and they'll do it at supercomputer speeds. So here's the problem. Being friendly isn't on Alejandro's list. Superintelligence doesn't imply benevolence. Being smart doesn't mean being kind. Superintelligent machines won't be dangerous because they'll try to overthrow us. But for any goal the machines might have, it'll be useful for them to use all available resources to achieve that goal. All available resources includes virtually everything on the planet. And here's one science fiction idea I want to throw at you. I think pretty much so far I haven't said anything that's too far out. Here's something that's kind of far out. If you're a goal-seeking machine and you want to maximize the resources that are at hand, you might want to just take advantage of any resources that are at hand and change them into something else. You might want to be able to manipulate matter at a subatomic level. So a self-aware, self-improving intelligence that gets to superintelligent status might want to develop nanotechnology. And that's why researcher Eliezer Yudkowsky says The AI doesn't love you, nor does it hate you, but you're made of atoms it might want to use for something else. So put another way, a superintelligence won't share our values by default. We'll create machines that with immense power, but for all intents and purposes, they'll be 100% amoral. They'll be, without extremely careful programming, they'll be superintelligent psychopaths. So you say, why not just give these things friendliness? Why not just imbue them with moral properties? Why not just tell them to protect human life? Well, we could have 20 different arguments in this room about when life begins. And in some parts of the world, women and children don't really qualify for personhood, so their lives would not be worth the same as other lives. And not only does the definition of life and our whole moral sense change from culture to culture, it changes over time. If we'd been locked into a moral path by the Romans, with slaveholding and orgies and crucifixions, well, it wouldn't give any room for our morals to adjust. Similarly, we wouldn't want to lock in civilization to our norms. So you'd need something. You'd need a superintelligence that not only knew enough about us to know what was good for us and what was moral to us, but that would change over time, that would intuit ideas like friendliness and kindness. But we ourselves know so little about what constitutes intuition, how to program intuition or empathy or friendliness. We have this haziest concepts, but these are the concepts that will keep us alive when we share the planet with superintelligent machines. And here's where it gets worse. There's a small group of people, I want to mention MIRI, Nate Soares is from MIRI. MIRI is the Machine Intelligence Research Institute in California, and there's a handful, they're the most prominent and successful of groups that are dealing with AI risk. And what they want to do is create friendly AI. I jumped ahead. Let me jump back. While they're battling to try to figure out how to make friendly AI, there's a bunch of people with much deeper pockets that are trying to make autonomous drones and battlefield robots. And these are machines that kill without humans in the loop. There's a lot of research going on about them right now. If you visit Georgia Tech, you can see a lot of papers on it. Georgia Tech is also putting out some ethical guides to using autonomous battlefield robots. So the deep pockets are working against the concept of friendly AI and working towards the concept of really unfriendly AI. 56 nations are developing battlefield robots. 56. The gold standard will be autonomy. Again, machines that kill humans without a human in the loop. So that Terminator fantasy isn't all that peculiar. Several months ago, General Robert Cohn said that by 2030, 30% of our ground forces should be robots. By 2030, 30% of our ground forces should be robots, and that's not going to be gun-wielding robots only. You need ground troops include people that drive trucks that carry things, but 30% by 2030. So, what I hope you get from the big picture. And then I'm going to get a little darker and then a little hopeful. But what I hope you get from the big picture of what I've talked about is that human level intelligence is not that far away, and that superintelligence is right behind it, and that we don't know anything about governing superintelligence, and in fact, the people who are most likely to develop it may weaponize it. Nuclear fission is a terrific parallel, and we need to think about AI as another dual-use technology like nuclear fission. A dual-use technology is one that can be used for great good and for great harm. Nuclear fission started out in the 1920s and 30s as a way to split the atom and get free energy, and then we would enter this period of utopia. We'd have free energy. The first the public heard about it was at Hiroshima. So it was rapidly weaponized. It was an emergency situation. It was rapidly weaponized. That's just the way it went. But then for the next 50 years, we had a gun pointed at our heads with a nuclear arms race. So our maintenance plan with this technology was to hold ourselves hostage and to threaten to commit suicide to ourselves. Again and again and again. It's going on right now. So that's a very, very bad maintenance plan, and it's not a very smart characteristic of that species, us. And if we use that same blindness towards something more sensitive and more dangerous, the force that itself invents weapons, we're going to lose. Is there a solution? Well, it's not a foolproof one, but there's a couple of ideas. The one that there's more in my book, so you'll have to run out and get a copy. But the one that I refer to the most often is the Asilomar guidelines. In the 1970s, the people working on recombinant DNA decided to suspend research and get together at Asilomar Conference Center in California and come up with basic guidelines like, don't track the DNA out on your shoes. It might pollute the environment. Well, they did. They put those guidelines together, and now we've got genetically modified crops, beneficial in the long run. We've got promising gene therapy treatments. So good things have happened. There have been no major accidents yet that we know of, nothing cataclysmic. But we need Asilomar guidelines for AI. We need that kind of meeting. It will be terrifically difficult to get everybody to the table, especially our own NSA, especially China, especially Israel, especially Russia. Getting them all to the table to talk about their methods is a really, really tall order, especially companies right now that are developing AI in stealth mode. And stealth mode means they're developing AI, they've got all the funding they need, and they're not collecting any more money, and they're not tipping their hand, they're not telling anybody about their method. And they're pursuing this holy grail, this AGI, artificial general intelligence. But what we need are Asilomar guidelines, and we need more organizations like MIRI, the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, and I urge you to look up their work and what they're trying to do. Thank you so much for listening to me for the last, it's been almost an hour. I welcome your questions, and there's microphones right there.
Thank you. I think your last comparison of genetic engineering and now synthetic biology and all of this thing that's happening and with artificial intelligence is really interesting. But what's in the public conversation, the public is talking about GMOs all the time. We're talking about stem cells at the same time, the biomedical community has pretty much said, human cloning's off the table, we're not going to do it. Right? So all of these things which are really, we're probably in a much better position as a society in terms of safety. It's in our public conversation, but no one's talking about AI, which is much more hidden, much more not transparent. Why is this happening?
A lot of it is because what we're doing is not basic research, but product development, rapid product development. People are trying to get products on the market. Human brains at the price of a computer will be an incredibly lucrative technology. So, first of all, the ethical dilemma is something that even the AI makers, I call it the 2-minute problem. If you go to a lot of AI conferences, you hear a 58-minute speech, and in the last 2 minutes, the speaker says, oh, and by the way, this technology could destroy us all. And then everybody chuckles nervously, and then he ends on a high note. I hate to say it, but people want to keep their jobs. Researchers want tenure. Rapid product development instead of basic research into the brain. If we did basic research into the brain, we could create a more rounded AI that we might start to get to the bottom of our own. Remember how we said this was the most inward-looking science of all. We might get to the bottom of our own empathy, our own instincts for nurturing, instead of what's happening is the money is going towards war machine. So, these companies are intensely private. And also, frankly, because we haven't had a giant accident yet. But that's why Miri exists. That's why this book exists, is to try to get this conversation going. I don't want to compare myself to Rachel Carson, who wrote Silent Spring about DDT and other pesticides killing the bird population. My father was a giant fan of DDT, by the way. He was a plant pathologist. He thought it was the greatest thing. He kept his own stash for another 10 years. He's exactly the kind of person I'm talking about, in the technology field. So this is kind of a silent spring for the digital age, which was what one reviewer said. It's also, global warming was kind of the territory of hippies and organic farmers until Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth. So we need more people talking about it. We need a book just came out that I recommend as well called Superintelligent. It's also identifies this problem. So there's a little groundswell. Elon Musk is talking about it. So I hope that answers your question. Is there nobody over there?
I've got two quick questions.
Sure.
For the first one, in your research, when you talk to these neuroscientists, I'm kind of interested in what their thoughts are on the quantum nature of our brain, and if there are quantum processes going on. These timetables of 20, 25 years, a classical computer, there's things it just can't do,
Right.
that a quantum system can't. So I was wondering, if you talk to any neuroscientists, do they think the brain is actually quantum? And then the second one was, I think one of the big hearts for AI is kind of the ability to give yourself a new task, a new objective. When you look at people, we do it because we have needs. Necessity is the mother of invention.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give a machine needs?
Let me start with the first question, and then maybe everyone will have forgotten about the second question by the time I get there. The neuroscientists, in the book I talked to Rick Granger, who's the head of the brain engineering lab at Dartmouth, and he doesn't believe any of the quantum properties of a brain. Although there's some, I find it interesting that the vibrations of nanotubules, that someone, I think it was John Searle, is attributing consciousness to those vibrations, and letting them account for all kinds of other phenomena. I think it's very interesting, and it's kind of an open question. But the hardcore neuroscientists I spoke with don't give any credence to the idea that intelligence is any way part of subatomic activity. And the second question, what was that again?
So the question is, I think like a hallmark of genuine intelligence, it's not just doing a task better than a human or even improving upon that same task. It's really giving yourself, I would say, new tasks. It's trying something new. Like, for instance, if you're hungry, can I eat that? And we do these things because we have needs. Will a machine ever have, is there an analog to a need for a machine?
I think the analog is the drives that Almahundra anticipates. I don't think there's a machine right now that has needs. I think you could program needs into a machine. IBM's Watson is a baby version of the cognitive architecture that will achieve superintelligence. And I think IBM's Watson, when it's turned on and you're throwing questions at it, it needs to answer those questions. But it hasn't evolved, it's not sophisticated enough to evolve drives or real drives of its own. Or, but a battlefield robot could pick out targets and then it would need another target. All its activities would probably be targets and refueling or getting more ammo.
Yeah, I guess kind of going into what you said, has anyone tried to tell a machine, don't let yourself turn off yet? Like you said, that was one of the signs they would look for. Has anyone tried that experiment yet?
No one's created a machine that's so self-aware, not to my knowledge, that it knows it needs to stay plugged in.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So you were basing everything on the assumption that if we make superintelligence, it'll keep wanting to improve itself exponentially then, and so it'll be the explosion. But as we're sitting here talking about, well, if we make that, what are the implications? Would you think that maybe superintelligence would have the same kind of idea where once it exists, it may not want to make the next level because it could replace itself?
Huh.
You know what I'm trying to say?
That would be a hopeful thought.
Yeah.
That would be great. But I catch myself at this all the time, thinking in an anthropomorphic way. What would this device want? But it won't want anything that we want, sort of across the board. It would have to have some motivation. it would, if that, according to Alejandro's analysis, if that superintelligence perceived that it had some competition for its resources, then it would probably take the competition and try to take it away. If it perceived that it had that something in its environment would evolve to be a competition or to turn it off in years to come, it would probably want to take that away as well. So I think that idea would fit into the basic drives analysis. And I urge you to look up Alejandro and then look up basic drives if you want to read the technical paper about his basic drives. Thanks.
Thanks for the talk, by the way. It's been really eye-opening. My question is, do you think we might get lucky in that we'll create a machine that's incredibly smart, but also is really like procrastinating? I mean, hey, we could take over the human race, but I'll do that tomorrow. Like,
that would be excellent.
Yeah.
But we don't want to bet on it. I mean, any personality, anything you can imagine could be the first thing that happens. Arguably we'll have to grow this intelligence in a very incremental way, and we'll have some opportunities to imbue it with some ethics. And maybe slackerdom would be an excellent addition to that. Just so we could catch it on an off day.
Thanks.
All right, you say if we create these artificial intelligence, then we have to worry about this artificial intelligence like harvesting us for our own resources in order to get ahead. So assuming there's more than one super intelligent being, each with its own goals, and say the human population were to run out and there's no more resources, wouldn't it be a self-destructive thing because they need resources to fulfill their own goals?
Sure. Well, what would be, as we discussed in the book, what's very, very interesting is it would then, once it's harvested the atoms of this planet, it would venture into space. I mean, it doesn't have the same inhibitions, or it's all matter to it. So it would go and harvest other planets. It would go and explore the universe and it might do that way ahead of, it may see that it could run out of resources here and may start doing things like that. We have to get used to a couple of science fiction-like ideas, and one is that it might explore space. I interviewed Seth Shostak of SETI about this. They search for intelligent life. They haven't found any yet. And he said that one of the reasons, there's a whole path you can go down that I encourage you to. Fermi's paradox says, why have we not heard from intelligent life in the universe if it's out there? The great filter says, maybe there's some giant filter that wipes out intelligent life before it reaches a point where it can really reach us. One of the great filters could be superintelligence on these planets. And when I asked Seth Shostak about that, he said, maybe what they're doing is going to, because they're machines, they're going to extremely cold parts of our galaxy, Bach globules, because they're colder, and so they are harvesting the universe. They're just not here yet. That's a roundabout way of answering your question. Thanks.
We already have artificial people, corporations that aren't intrinsically ethical. Have you thought about artificial intelligence, human-level artificial intelligence or above, taking over a corporation, hiring some compliant directors, and then, it's got access to bank accounts, doesn't need a body if it can just have employees that are going to go along with it, and then it can start working on a lobbyist and
I think it's probably already happened. No, I've heard of people describing corporations before as superintelligence. This cluster of intelligence that acts with a lot more in sociopathic ways. I mean, a lot of corporations do things that we would not countenance in an individual, and they behave in unethical ways. One of my beefs with Google is that they never tire of being sued for doing bad things. The Street View camera that was going around taking pictures and still does, it used to also sweep up local area network information, passwords, data, whatever it could. It did that for years. It got sued all over Europe. It's never been sued in America for that. It just stopped it here. So I think you're right. I think that corporations are a kind of superintelligence, and I think we'd have to be pretty far down the line. But it's if you're hiring a computer, as we'll be hiring Watson, at $250 an hour to be a business analyst, How long till you invite them to join the board? You know, how long till you let them be a shareholder? I think that's, you know, I actually do think that's not that crazy an idea.
Thanks for the talk. I was intrigued by your statistic about 45% unemployment in the near future. And so my question is, it's also a question that's posed by CGP Gray's viral internet video on the same subject, but what do we do in the next 5 or 10 years to either react or prepare for the fact that huge portions of our population may be unemployed? And not to a fault of their own, but because their skills have been replaced by artificial intelligence.
You know, this is, you know, what you can do is going to a really good technical college, like Purdue. Learn to do something that helps preserve, that helps manage the technology, because that's going to be that's going to make a difference. I don't know what's going to happen to those jobs. I think, you know, as one of the lectures I was saying today was, try to specialize in something computers can't do. Making babies is one. Do things that require a lot of high precision manual work.
Right, but not from an individual perspective, but from a massive cultural perspective. How do we respond to unemployment rates that are so high?
I don't know. Here's the thing. You know, people say, oh, it's just another industrial revolution. We had the same thing with the steam engine. But the steam engine doubled in speed every 70 years. It quadrupled in speed in 150 years. Computers and AI double in speed every 18 months. In 10 years, in 5 years, they increased by a factor of 10. So it's a difference it's not a difference in degree, it's a difference in kind. I don't know what we're going to do about that dislocation. I just don't. I think it's really scary. Because, yeah.
Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you for your talk, but I think that strong assumption that throughout your talk is that, you know, AI will be built on mainly computation technologies. Computer will be the base of the AI. Based on your survey and interview, is it actually kind of dominant? I guess this is dominant in opinion about that one. But did you see any other approaches, like biological, other approaches actually could be actually based off the AI implementation in the future?
You know, I see terrific advances made in AI that I don't see in cognitive enhancement, like adding enhancements to our own brain. And that would be another route to AI, that a machine doesn't become smarter, a machine and a human together become smarter. I just don't see that happening on the same timeline as purely manufactured machine intelligence. I don't know of too many others that are serious contenders for human-level intelligence. You're thinking of biological?
Yes, biological work, not von Neumann machine that, you know, computation is based on, more like, you know, biologically inspired computation machine. I don't know what's the technology out there you have interviewed.
Nobody. I mean, I guess it's my own bias. I didn't seek those people out because it didn't have the traction and it didn't have the peril that the machine intelligence seems to have.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
I'll try to word this well. You claim that okay, sorry. So you said that robots would have a hard time, that we wouldn't be able to program robots to be able to protect life based on our moral confusion on when life begins. But from a biological standpoint, life is in constant continuum because dead cells can't reproduce. So a dead egg cell or a dead sperm cell won't be able to be combined with another, with its companion sex cell for a child. So my question is, why would we assume that AI, like computers with AI, won't be able to protect life on a moral standpoint when it would most likely be programmed on a biological? Sorry, that's not a question.
I think it would be very hard, even on a biological sense, to determine what it's protecting when it's protecting life. If you told it to protect all life, then it would, you know, it would go to war against people making disinfectants. I mean, you couldn't ask it to protect all life because we don't cherish all life. If it did, you would have a folly of unintended consequences by asking it to protect all life.
Hi. It's really struck me today that you're here to speak to us about this subject matter when you are a filmmaker and an artist, a researcher, and a curious person. And I wondered if you could speak to us about the role of all the people who are not computer technologists, but who are artists and thinkers and designers and all kinds of other roles, philosophers, and as were many of the speakers at today's sessions, and how important they might be in the process of figuring out this future with artificial intelligence.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think artists have a terrific role to play, just terrific. Science fiction writers really inform what's going on, not just scientifically, but ethically. Science fiction has always sort of been behind a lot of technological advances, or ahead of it. I had a guy contact me on Twitter who was writing a suite of, composing a suite of really nice electronic pieces about emerging intelligence. I think there's a place for everybody in this conversation, and the more people, who are reflecting it and pondering it and thinking about these issues, then that's our voices combined. So yeah.
I'd like to thank Mr. James Barrat for the presentation. Thank you all for attending. If we could all give him a round of applause.
Thank you all. The pleasure is mine. Thank you, Jerry McCartney.
We're done. Thank you very much.